Welcome, everybody, to the Competition Archery Media Podcast, where we explore all things pertaining to competition archery. I'm your host, PJ Reilly, and our CAM podcast is brought to you by O'Neill's Classic Archery. And with us today, straight from humid South Florida, we have Jesse Broadwater, who just won the... What was the actual title of the tournament? I know it's Field Trials, but it's USA Archery's National Championship.
Correct. Yeah, it was both in one. So the Nationals and the Trials was this year.
Gotcha. So how did that feel? I have always admired your field archery game because you do all that. You were doing all that crazy stuff in Europe, the steep angles and stuff. But right. I don't think I've seen you doing much field recently. No, I haven't. I tried out for the trials for the World Championship in 2012 and ended up making it and went on to win that one. And then I tried out again in 2014 because it's every 2 years you get to try out for it. Ended up making that one and winning that one. So, but yeah, it's been a few years, and I figured, this year it's in Yankton in October. So I was like, what the heck? That's a no brainer. So kind of dusted off some of my rusty, feet of field. Well, I still call it feet of field. It's world field. Dusted off some of those skills and, I only practiced about a day for it and went out there, and they had the courses set up pretty darn tough. The unmarked course we shot was pretty technical and steep and difficult. And I was pretty happy with how I done. I mean, I missed a few of the bunny targets, which, I mean, they're not hard to miss. You're aiming at a little 6-ring, so I missed a few of them, but overall I was pleased with how it went. So looking forward to, wearing the USA jersey again. And, So first off, I had seen people talking about the steep angles, and I saw some of Paige Pierce's photos from the course. Yankton, South Dakota, I would not think elevation and stuff, other than the platforms that you shoot on. Right. But I could clearly see she was in the woods shooting some elevation. I didn't know they had that there. Out by the lake that's where we used to shoot the Nationals. I believe the last year we had them there was 2007 maybe. Right. And there's some pretty good terrain out there. It's pretty flat back, behind the headquarters there, but they're going to have the championships, I guess, out by the lake there. So there's a lot of terrain, and it's definitely, he could have made it a lot tougher than he did, and it was already tough enough. So he said he before we shot, I talked to Bruce, and he's like, this is going to be the toughest course you ever shot. He's like, Pro Series, anything like this is the toughest course you ever shot. And it was pretty close to it. I shot one that was the Pro Series in Wales. That was probably the toughest thing I ever shot, but this was right up there. So he done a good job. Was that the one in Wales? I think I remember seeing a picture of you shooting at a target that was on top of a building or something. Well, yeah, that was probably Fort Van Leer in Belgium, which they had. That was probably my favorite field course of all time. It was just a cool setting. But Wales was actually shot in an old rock quarry. And so basically and they had us shooting out of the pit up, straight up a cliff on top of the cliff. And then, we'd have to hike up around and shoot down into the quarry. And there was the one year they had this thing where they had all the countries shoot against each other. So it was like USA against, England and stuff like that. So they, our first target on that course was an 80-yarder down, and it was I can't even remember the cut. It was more than 10-yard cut. So it was pretty steep. I love that stuff. That's where I actually really enjoy that type of archery. The NFAA field, that's kind of where I grew up shooting that. And then when I started getting into the world archery field stuff, that became my new favorite. So I enjoy it. For people who don't know, NFAA is all marked. Every distance. Yeah. World archery, you have half unknown, half known. Yeah, we shoot. So it's you shoot a 20 centimeter, 40, 60, and 80 centimeter target. That's the targets that they have. You shoot 24 targets per range, and one day is unmarked and one day is marked.
there's a certain range that targets have to be within. So, that range that they got to be within.
Right.
But still you gotta range it. You gotta, and you can't use any electronics. You can't use any angleometers, even if it's like an analog. So you have to guess the degree of cut and all that. So, man, it's really, it's the most pure form of archery, I think. You just go out there with your bow and arrow. That's it. No help. And you got to figure out a way to do it. And, once you figure it out, and it's pretty satisfying. You walk up to a 60 centimeter face and you're like, well, it's got to be within this range. I don't know exactly. And to hit the 6, you got to be within a meter or half a meter, depending on your speed. So, but when you figure it all out and you get the yardage and you get the cut and you're there, like when you draw back on that first shot, man, you're just hoping that you've done everything right. And, if you drill it on the first shot, it's very rewarding. So that's what I love about it.
The cuts now, when you can use a rangefinder, are there rangefinders out there that are that accurate, especially with some of those real radical cuts?
There is nowadays. Like years past when I shot the Pro Series stuff, I basically just made up my own cut chart.
Yeah.
And then I kind of I started looking at Archer's Advantage cut charts and figured out they was pretty darn close. So then I started laminating their cut chart cards and taking them with me on the range. And I would make little notes beside them. And just over the years, I've just kind of modified, cut charts down. And, but nowadays I think there's, I know Loophole is putting the Archer's Advantage program in a couple of their rangefinders. So that's probably about the most accurate rangefinder out there as far as cuts go for archery.
So with shooting the World Archery and shooting that unknown side, so now might we see you shooting Open Pro at the ASA tournaments?
Well, if I can figure out a way to range them more accurately, maybe. Yeah, I tried out. I had a crash course yardage judging. We'll call it a judging crash course, like back in early 2000s with Tony Taza.
Right.
When he used to be my neighbor there in Pennsylvania. So
yeah.
I wanted to get into, he's like, there's a ASA in Roanoke. Why don't you, come up here, practice for a couple of days and we'll go down there and shoot that. So I had a 2-day crash course with him and he taught me a lot. He is extremely good at judging yardage still to this day. And he taught me some of his tricks and stuff. And I went down and shot semi-pro back then. I think I finished like 6th or something like that. But I think if I put in enough time, it'd take me, those guys are so good, McCarthy and Levi and all those guys are so good at it. It would take me probably a few years to where I was somewhat competitive, I feel like. So yeah, I don't know. That's tough. That's a tough game to jump right in there and compete with those guys unless you got some background or you just are really good at judging yardage and not only judging, but making the shot too.
Right.
Course management and all that. So
it's like you said with the World Archery, you know the range at least when you see the target. Okay, right. So it narrows it down for you a little bit.
Exactly. Yep.
So what is it about field archery that you love so much? Because like you would go and do that European, that Pro Series. Every year that came around, I thought, man, that just seems like the torture test of field archery.
Yeah, I enjoy the challenge, and it's like I said, I enjoy the reward you get from it after you figure everything out right, and then you have to, it's a thinking man's game. So you not only have to figure all that out right, you still got to make the shot. And when you're aiming, on a 30 to 45 degree down or up target, it's not as easy as aiming on the flat ground. So, and you're aiming at it's a 20-yard bunny target, you're aiming at a little over an inch dot. So yeah, I enjoy the challenge and the reward you get from it. And when you come off a course like that, you're totally drained. And then you obviously you're not going to shoot a perfect score on it. So you want to go back and improve the next time. It's not like indoors where, it's almost like you got to shoot perfect every time.
Yeah.
These courses and the style of field archery I like, there's usually a lot of room for improvement. And so that just keeps you coming back and makes you want to do better.
What is the range of distance that you would shoot in one of those courses?
So the world field is anywhere from 10 meters to 55 meters on the unmarked.
Okay.
And then it goes out to 60 meters on the marked round.
Okay. So that's about 70 yards.
Close to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Close to that. Man.
Yep.
Yeah. And shooting that. And like you said, the side hills, the uphills, the downhills.
Yeah. It's kind of unique too, because a lot of times there's higher scores shot on the unmarked round than there is the marked round, just because if you got a pretty good system of ranging the targets, I don't want to say that goes out the window. I mean, you're still gonna, have some mistakes there, but
right.
Just because if you got a good system, the distance is a little bit shorter on each target, and they don't always set them to max distance, on the unmarked. I mean, they can.
Oh, gotcha.
It's kind of strange. A lot of times there'll be higher scores shot. Like this past weekend, I shot a higher score on the unmarked than I did the marked. And the marked course was, I'd say, a much easier course, but it was just stretched out a little bit longer, had a little bit of wind to deal with. And then I just wasn't really on top of my shots that day. So I ended up shooting a 422 out of 432 on the unmarked. And then I think I shot a 413 or 50, I think a 413 on the marked round.
Gotcha.
So, kind of interesting.
Yeah. And for the world archery round, is that a 3 hours per target or 4?
Yeah, 3 hours per target.
That's 3. Okay. So now your first shot. So you come up to each target, you take your first shot. I'm guessing you'll use that as a gauge for the next 2. Then you're like, okay.
Yes. Yeah. So if you walk up and you range it and whatever, and you shoot your first shot and say it's a mid 4 at 6 o'clock. One of the things I've learned over the years is to not try to figure out how much to adjust your sight to get it in the middle. Just aim exactly opposite of that. So aim mid 4 at like 12 o'clock and shoot your next 2 rather than trying to figure out the dope on it. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You'll just aim accordingly rather than adjust.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah.
But you got to make a good shot. Like that's the most important part, is making a good shot on your first arrow. So you know what to do. Like if you go up and you don't make a good shot on the first one, you're like, well, was that because I didn't make a good shot, or is it because I didn't figure stuff out right? So then it takes you another try to figure it out. So that's what I love about it. It's just a thinking man's game, and you got to keep your head in it the whole time. And it's pretty awesome. I wish more people would do it. I think a lot of people are intimidated by it, and I'm trying to spread the word to everyone. Like, if you have questions about it, it's not that hard. It's actually enjoyable, and I'll more than happy to share everything that I do with you. And because we need more people into it. I think if more people shot it, they'd see how fun it is. And I was always taught, like, I grew up on a field course, NFA field course. And I was always told that, that form of archery is going to help every other form of archery that you shoot, indoors, 3Ds, hunting, whatever, because you get to learn your setup. You know what your setup does in the wind and on cuts and stuff like that. Yeah. So I think if more people shot it, it would improve every other aspect of their game too. So, well,
it's interesting you mentioned that. When I started shooting in the early 90s, there was field everywhere. It was NFAA field, so it was all known distance. But there was a field shoot that I could and would go to every weekend and shoot them. And I loved it. And definitely I was my best archer during that period.
Yep.
Just because you had to be so good at, from a wide range of distances. Like you said, you had to know your setup, or, you were going to be out of there. But then I don't know, it seemed to die out. 3D was kind of coming in. I know around here where I am in Southeast Pennsylvania, it's not as popular as it was back then.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the big reason is it's just harder for local clubs to manage a 28 target field range. I mean, it's a lot of work to maintain that. And, you can go out, you can throw 20 3D targets out, pretty quick. You don't have to have a completely clear shooting lane because you're trying to simulate hunting. And you got a lot of bow hunters that's all, they just want to go out and practice for bow hunting. And that's good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think that's the main thing. And a lot of these, clubs, it's mostly older guys nowadays, and it's hard for them to go out there and maintain the courses. So I think that's probably the biggest reason.
So we were talking, so you got this championship. Well, I should ask you about that. How did that feel come after that layoff to come out there and to win the U.S. national championship like that?
Yeah, it felt good. Felt really good. Like I said, I didn't have much time to prepare for it. I literally spent one day getting my setup because I had to change my sight set up a little bit. So I spent time ranging and figuring all that out. And then honestly, I spent more time ranging than I did actually shooting. But it felt good. There was Dave was there, Dan was there. There was a lot of good shooters there. There wasn't a lot of shooters there, but the ones that were there definitely knew the game and knew how to play it. So I knew I was going to have to be on top of my game to make it. And once I found out that the world championship was in Yankton, I really wanted to try out for it and make it. I'd love to have another field championship. So that's going to be one of my main focuses. So it felt good. I mean, it was not just a shoot that I went to just, for a fun shoot. I really tried to make the team, and it was pretty rewarding to do that. So,
and then now you're going to go to the World Championships in October, I believe it is. I saw, hopefully the mosquitoes are gone by then from Yankton. But now in Europe, field still is a very prevalent game. So you're going to be spending a lot of time working on your field game between now and then?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, there's so many good field shooters because they shoot that a lot over there, and there's a lot of tough courses, so they know their stuff pretty good. I don't have hills to practice on down here, but I can get pretty creative and figure out ways to shoot angles and stuff like that. So that's definitely, I'll probably have I'll have a different setup, a different bow and everything just for that, and just leave it sit there and pick it up and practice with it. And then, use a different bow for ASA and stuff like that. So, I'm going to be practicing pretty hard. It's a little ways away yet, but I definitely want to be prepared and know, cause they can throw some crazy stuff at you. And it's the same thing. Like when ASA, they throw a 2-yard target up there. A lot of people don't know what to do. So it's, so
me. I don't know.
So, and then you throw a crazy 45-degree angle on top of that, and then you're really scratching your head. So one of those things where you have to just know that's where you don't want to get caught off guard and miss points because you don't know your setup or don't know where to put your sight. Like if you make a bad shot and miss, that's going to happen, but I don't want to miss any because I didn't know my setup. So I'm going to be trying to go over every square inch of it and being prepared.
And you said that you will be shooting the NFAA national championships. That's in Pennsylvania in July, I believe it is.
Yep.
That's when you traditionally shoot.
Yes. Yeah. I try to shoot that one every year. Yep.
And so for field archery, from your estimation, your years of experience, what is like a really difficult shot? What is one that makes you go, man, what do I got to do here?
Well, I mean, obviously the 80-yarder, you get to make a good shot on that. The 50-yarders, because you're at max distance for that target, and you got to shoot 4 arrows at that on the field day. So that can be tough. The 32-yarders on the quad on the hunter round, and then the 30-yarder on the quad on the field round. You got to make good shots on those. And now, the pros are counting X's. So you not only have to hit the dot, you want to hit X's. So that really tightened up, the game there. Before, a lot of people was happy with just hitting the dot. So just having good marks and stuff like that is important. But I would say, Mechanicsburg's pretty flat. They're really nice courses, easy walking and stuff like that. So cuts aren't going to be much of a challenge there. But I'd say those few targets are ones that, you definitely want to have, you focus on those ones. Some of the closer ones are not as difficult. You just basically you're changing the ratio of yardage to target size. So it just technically is a little bit easier, but it's still, the NFA round is still quite a challenge too. And because it's a long day, you're 4 arrows at 28 targets. So 112 arrows, heat, humidity, wind, rain, whatever. You got to keep your head in it the whole time and not set your sight on especially the hunter day, because there's so many walk-ups and stuff like that. constantly moving your sight. So if you can make it through a week or a national tournament without missetting your sight or screwing up, you've already done pretty good. So
now, do you prefer the hunter face, which is the white center surrounded by black, or the field target, which is the black dot and then white and then black?
Certain day, I would say more times than not, I actually prefer the hunter, just because I don't know, I like aiming at the white dot better than the black one.
Yeah.
But there's certain days it's weird with me with field archery. It's I kind of know how I'm going to do the first target, and when I walk out there and just kind of get a feel for how things look, like I think it was 2009 in Mechanicsburg when I shot a couple 560s there. It was weird. I walked on the course, and every target, every dot just looked huge. Like it looked like there's no way I'm going to miss any today. Like I don't know why that happens, but some days it's like that, and then some days you walk out there and it's not like that, and you're like, man, I'm going to have to really make good shots and, bear down. But so it just depends on the day really and how I'm feeling. But I'd say more times than not, I kind of prefer to aim at the white spot more than the black.
Yeah. So. And the World Archery is black with yellow.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're all like that. They just have the one version.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. And there's a 6 ring inside of the big dot there. And so like you say, 432 is possible. If you shoot over, I mean, a world championship scene, how the setting, how they set them usually there. If you shoot over a 410, you're doing pretty good on, either the unmarked or the marked day. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say is it the cuts that are the hardest part of that game, or is it the unknown distance? Or you tell me what you think the hardest part of that game is.
Well, I mean, the unmarked day, it's both. It's both. I would say for me, it's probably, I would say that the cuts are maybe a little bit more dependent on the course. If it's a challenging course, because like I said, I got my ranging down pretty good. So I can usually get within, half a meter or a meter on the 80 centimeter face the first try. So that's pretty good. But then, trying to figure out the cut and everything on top of that can be challenging. And a lot of people spend so much time and effort into ranging and not enough time on the cut. They might nail the yardage exactly, but then miss the cut and miss because of that. So, if you walk up there and you range it at 41 meters and it's a 20%, cut or whatever, and you don't know where to, you don't know how much to cut from that, then you're going to miss because you didn't do the cut right, but you actually ranged right. So it's, I don't know. It really depends a lot on the setting and the course and the layout and stuff like that. And if they stretch the distances out to max on the unmarked day, it can be very challenging. So,
man. And so I'm guessing like a long distance steep angle, that's probably going to be your biggest cut.
Yeah.
What's the most yardage you can recall cutting from a shot?
Well, the most yardage, I mean, I've shot some stuff that as far as the angle, I mean, pretty much straight down, but as far as the most yardage cut off, that would be the longest with the most cut. So it would have probably been that 80 yarder I shot on that course in Wales. And I can't, Chris White, if you're listening, I know you remember all this stuff. you probably remember it. It's on video, and I ended up nailing it the first shot. I shot with Rod Menzer and, who else was it? Was it Gillingham? I think me, Rod, and Gillingham was the USA team. And they made me shoot first, of course. And I walked up there and I was just, I had no idea. I'm doing math like crazy in my head, trying to figure all this out. Of course, the wind's blowing too. And I'm like, all right, screw it. Draw back and shoot the first one. It was right in the X. I just remember Chris White going, you got to be kidding me. But,
man.
It was quite a cut. I'll have to try to find it on video. Maybe I'll post it here. But
yeah. Oh, man. And with your field setup, with your bow and your arrows and your stabilizers, what is it you're trying to achieve with that? And is it different from, say, your 3D bow?
Yeah, I do shoot a little bit of a different stabilizer setup from indoors to outdoors, and usually a little bit different on 3D course. So my field bow, I like it to be like just easy to manage, because and that also depends on like, if I go to Mechanicsburg, I know I'm not going to have steep shots. So I can probably, get away with a little bit more leverage on my bars. But if like for the world trials, I had my bow set up like easy to manage, a little bit lighter. And I was kind of glad that I did. So like indoors this year, I ended up running a 30-inch front bar with about 10 ounces on the front of it, and then a 15 out back with anywhere from 12 to 15 on it. And then when I went outside and started to set up a field bow, it's always been like this for me. When I start shooting distance, I just prefer a little bit of a lighter setup. So I started stripping some weight off the front, and I just seem to be able to flow through my shot better at distance. So I'll stand at 80 or 100 yards and just kind of group tune, and you just start playing around with weights on there until I feel like, I don't struggle at all with it.
Yeah.
So I ended up at like 5 ounces. So about half the weight that I shot indoors on my front bar, and 15 on a 15-inch bar.
Okay. Gotcha.
So a little bit of a lighter, easier to manage setup.
Stayed with the 30-inch front bar?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
I try to always, what I tell people with stabilizers is I try to have as much leverage on the bow and on the bars as you can handle for whatever round you're shooting. So if you can, come off a field range at the end of the day at 112 arrows and like feel like you used up just about all of your energy, but you're not breaking down like, 15 targets in, your bow feels heavy. You want to have it kind of maximize and kind of, use some efficiency there with that. So I'm like, try to have your bow, as heavy as you can handle for whatever round you're shooting. For 3D, we shoot one shot every 10 minutes or something, 20 shots a day.
Right.
And so you can, you only have to focus on that one shot. So I do tend to load my bow up a little bit more for 3D and stuff like that.
And so you are famous for shooting a hinge back tension release. What do you do? Because those angles can make your draw length feel like it's like 2 inches longer than normal. Do you play with that on a field bow setup?
Honestly, you shouldn't have to if you approach the target and draw back the right way. A lot of people, if they're shooting an uphill shot, they'll keep their torso basically like they're shooting on level ground, and they'll just raise their arm, and everything gets out of line that way. So if you can, basically the way I was taught to do it when I was young is draw back like you're shooting a level target and then bend at the waist. And that way you keep, basically keep your form exactly the same. You're just bending at the waist.
Yeah.
So really, if you feel like your draw length's off shooting up or downhill, it's probably because you're not setting up on it right. Like I shot those shots. I'm shooting a longer draw length now than I've ever shot. And even shooting that course out there, I didn't feel like my draw was, any different. So
yeah. And what are you pulling for weight on your bow?
60 pounds.
60 pounds. And it's the Invicta 37 or 40?
I've been shooting the 40 since right before Vegas.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So, SVX, 60 pounds. I'm holding about, we'll say 19 pounds, depending on what scale you use.
Oh, gotcha. All right. You like a little weight back there.
I do. Yeah. Yeah. That's just another thing, like with shooting a back tension. And that's another thing I tell people, shoot as much holding weight as you can handle too. Cause I feel like you come through with a lot cleaner shot with the more holding weight. At least that's been my experience. There's people out there that like Marlowe. I think he shoots really low holding weight. He does well with it. So there's people that, that do well with the lighter holding weight. I hold a light holding weight really good, but I feel like it's not as forgiving for me. I feel like the forgiveness goes out the window, and I don't come through my shots as clean. So I try to maximize that holding weight to give me a cleaner shot.
Now for field archery, we see you on videos all the time. We see you going back and forth between your 2-finger hinge and 3-finger. What do you like for field? Or is it just something you're feeling at the time?
Yeah, the 2-finger, which I know Taz had done a video with you guys not long ago, and he basically nailed it. Like, I agree with everything he said there. Like, when I shoot a 2-finger, my alignment feels the best that it's ever felt. I mean, now I do shoot a 3-finger. Like, I have a shoot a 3-finger release, a fulcrum.
Right.
And sometimes I'll shoot a 2-finger. Sometimes I'll throw my 3rd finger up around there. And usually when you see me put my 3rd finger up on there, it's because I'm maybe hanging up on my shot a little bit. And just that 3rd finger gives me a little bit of extra leverage and, kind of decreases my shot timing a little bit. So it helps the shot go off.
Gotcha.
So if I'm shooting here, if I'm good and relaxed shooting and everything, and I'm not struggling to get the release to go off, and I don't want to adjust it, depending on the situation, I usually just shoot a 2-finger. I just like that feel. So.
Yeah. And that's what you were shooting for the championships. Yeah.
I've been shooting the same release for many years now.
Yeah. Tell us about that, because that's always fascinating to me. This release that you helped develop, and you have a whole series of them with the folks at TRU Ball and Excel. Tell us how that happened and how that relationship has grown into what it is.
Yeah, so there's always just a few things that was kind of I'd wanted to see incorporated into a release out there. Like we used to own an archery shop back in the early 2000s. So I've seen all different kinds of stuff coming in and all different types of form and, issues come up with tuning and trying to get an arrow to fly right and everything. And a lot of it, is either the bow hand, torquing the bow a different way, their draw length's wrong, and they have string pressure on their face. And I preach to everyone all the time how much that can affect the string oscillation and ultimately the tune and the impact, just with a little bit of different string contact on your face.
Yeah.
So I wanted to see something designed into a release where you could kind of alleviate that. And that's kind of the idea behind the LAS system on that, the Fulcrum Flex, where you can call it a lever alignment system, where you can move that head around basically your index finger, and you can put it closer to your second and third finger or more over top your index finger. And it does two things. It kind of helps alleviate some of that string pressure on your face. And it also changes the way that the pressure is transferred across all of your fingers. If you're shooting a 2, 3, or 4 finger,
right,
it changes how that pressure is applied there, and it'll change how easy the release goes off. Or if you move it towards your second and third finger, it's going to put more pressure on those fingers, take some off your index. So it's going to make it a little bit harder to fire, but a lot of people don't like all that pressure on their index. And then if you move it over your index finger, the release is super easy to go off, but you have a little bit more pressure on your index finger. So
right,
that's kind of the two main things that it does there. And then of course we got the flex fingers in there, and you can shoot it 2, 3, or 4 finger. And then I also wanted, this was back when we designed those, it was back and I was still shooting at 50 meters, and everyone at the time, because it's usually windy shooting those shoots, they shoot their hinge, and as soon as it started getting windy, they pull out a button and want to shoot that. And I'm like, no one out there has made a back tension and a button, on the same handle to feel exactly the same and impact the same. So I'm like,
right,
let's see if we can do that. So it was quite a feat because, the Fulcrum and the Abyss have a hole, you got to put your index finger through. And so making a button release with all the internal mechanicals and making all that work around that index finger hole was pretty challenging, but Mark, the engineer there at TRU Ball, figured it out and done a great job with it. So we have 2 identical matching and feeling releases in your hand, same impact point, but one's a button and one's a hinge.
Yeah.
And the button still has the, lever alignment system and everything on it too. So yeah, I think that was 2014 or 15 we come out with those, and they've been incredibly successful. So see a lot of them out there.
It's funny. I know I've mentioned on other podcasts before that I was at the World Cup that was in Salt Lake, and I was kind of, it's where they shoot the finals is in this kind of bowl. And so we were up above, and I was standing over Braden Galantine, and the wind was just swirling in there like crazy. And he was shooting against a guy who was shooting actually an index finger release, and Braden had his hinge, and I just watched him struggling. I could feel his pain.
Oh yeah.
Just wanting that to go off, and it just wouldn't. And
exactly. Yeah.
And then actually in Metropolis 2 years ago at the ASA finals, I think it was senior pro, one of the guys right in front of me, he was shooting a hinge, and it was just, the wind was brutal. And I watched him switch. He dropped his hinge, pulled out, and I think it was a Fulcrum because they were matching handles. I remember it didn't look much different for him, but
yeah, it's a lot of people do that. I still just shot the hinge no matter what. And I just kind of, I didn't focus as much on getting through I was just focusing more on like increasing the pressure a little bit more, and then that would automatically make my shot fire better. But it's tough in the wind no matter what you do. I mean, you can load the bow up, you can shoot a button. It's still tough. I mean, you still got to manage it. There's nothing you're going to do that's going to make it easy to shoot in the wind. So.
Yeah. Sticking with the fulcrum now, and I believe that you had, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a deal where some proceeds of that go to a charitable endeavor. Remind me about that.
Yeah, we're still donating to this day. I mean, and the Summers family there at TRU Ball has just been, they're awesome. And I'm glad to see they're killing it right now.
They are.
they can't keep up. So that's good to see. But yeah, when we come out with this, I'm like, well, another thing I'd like to do is donate a portion of the proceeds to somewhere. And when I was living in Pennsylvania there, my wife actually, she owned her own business at the time, a spa. And so she knew like some of the businesses around just because they would come in there and stuff. And so she's actually the one that figured out where, what might be a good place to donate to. And it was that Windber Research Center. It's got a different name now, but it's still the same place. So we took a ride down there. I gave him a call and took a ride down, took a little tour, and I was blown away at, the small town of Windber and this place that was there that was doing all this, high tech, high level stuff. And they had equipment in there and a full lab and these machines in there that like, there's only a couple of them in the world and stuff. I was just blown away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, this is definitely, I want to donate here. I mean, they do all types of cancer research and stuff like that. So yeah, I talked to Greg Summers there and I'm like, hey, I found this place. And actually he came up and visited too. And he was the same way. He's like, yeah, I have a really good feeling about this place. So yeah, they TRU Ball, they donate a portion of every single sale of the fulcrum and the abyss, as well as I donate too. I send them a check every quarter, and so does Greg.
Awesome. So that's great.
Pretty cool.
Do you have any idea how many flexes and abysses have been sold?
I don't off the top of my head. I mean, it's on paperwork. It's a good bit.
Yeah.
And especially, it's always good the first quarter and stuff. And when we first come out with them, it was really good the whole year. And then when we done an update on them and added the flex fingers, the sales went back up again. And so I think we're about due for another little update. I have a couple ideas we can add to them. So
how's that feel being an archer? You're in the game, the tools that archers need. How does it feel to be a part of designing something that you then see, hey, this thing works and people appreciate it. They're using it.
Yeah, that's like one of the things I enjoy the most about it. I'm a pretty like technical guy. I just always piddle around with things, and no matter what it is, can't leave nothing alone. So I always try to find out ways to make things a little bit better. And, there's, like I said, there was just some things I felt like was missing, with releases and back tension and stuff. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoy that. And it's good working back and forth with engineers a lot of times, because a lot of times the engineers aren't shooters themselves. And so what looks good on paper, and they're like, no, this is how it's got to be. This is going to work. And, sometimes I got to step in and say, no, it's not going to work because, I've been doing this for a while and here's why it's not going to work and that. So I kind of enjoy that back and forth. And then when you finally, because a lot of times it's many, many prototypes until you get stuff figured out. And like on that fulcrum flex, with the way that all the pivot points are designed and the click and the moon and how it's shaped. And there's a lot of really, really fine machining in there that people don't even realize that it has to be exactly right for it to work right. So until we, and when you finally work back and forth for sometimes months at a time and get all that nailed down, and you got the final product in your hand and it's just feels right. It's another one of those, gratifying things that I just kind of enjoy,
Yeah. And you have another one that we're waiting to see big numbers of that was released in January that I saw, and I mentioned that the engineering in that thing is beyond anything I've ever seen. I haven't seen as much stuff up close as you have, but it's a release that switches from a thumb button to a tension activated release. I forget the name of it. What's it called?
It's the Abyss X-Tension.
That's it, X-Tension.
So, I kind of been on them for years. Another one of my passions is, getting young youth into archery. And I feel like a lot of times if you start working with someone who has maybe just getting into it and was taught by someone that really didn't know kind of what they was doing, but, they wanted to get them into it, which is good, but they kind of have some bad habits right off the bat. I feel like a pure tension release is one of those things. It's just going to help the youth out. So that was kind of my first thought of it. There's a lot of people that still, a lot of professional archers will go home and practice with a pure tension release just to kind of get that feel. So it has a lot of places, where it can be used. But my main thought was, trying to get youth to feel what back tension actually is, because you can put a back tension in their hand and explain it to them and they can still just twist it off. You know what I mean?
Right.
But you can't do that with this one. You actually have to pull tension to get it to go off. So, you train them with that for a while, and then you put a back tension in their hands. Once you get it set right, they're still, they get the feel of, kind of the tension they got to use to set it off. And then later on, if they feel like they want to shoot a button release, all you have to do is turn a screw and they got a button release there, so they can kind of shoot it the same way and the same exact feel. So it should be about ready to be shipped out here. They're, like you say, they're so busy, but I think it's about ready to be.
That thing is an engineering marvel. What they got into that to change that functionality. I was like, oh man, Brandon Reyes came up with one for us to do a video, and I thought, man, that is
yeah, it's pretty slick.
That's crazy. But Mark, as you mentioned, the engineer there at TRU Ball, he just
oh yeah, he's got his own little office there, and he's secluded, and that's what he does. He pulls around and figures out things like that. He's pretty keen on it.
We were in there for a tour, and he was like, you're not allowed to see this. You can't see that. I'll show you this.
Yeah.
But getting back to field archery now, before we do that, so there's a couple ASAs coming up before the NFAA field nationals. So you're prepped for that. Are you one of those guys who you need to shoot those ASA targets, or do you just need to shoot to get your game right?
Well, I just recently got some targets. I had practice on them a little bit here and there. There's a local club here that had them and stuff, and I'd head down there from time to time. But more times than not, I would just make sure my sight tape was dead on, and I would just shoot at a piece of cardboard or some of my targets with just a real faint magic marker with the size of a 12, and just try to make it as difficult as I could to see and aim at. But I just recently got some targets and been practicing on them, and I feel like that's helped me out a good bit. And I just kind of shoot different ways on them and different sun angles and stuff like that, and make sure that it's another one of those things where you're just kind of learning your setup. I've been shooting a clarifier for the last few, ASAs here, and sometimes I feel like maybe I get some left and rights because of that. And so I've been tinkering around with trying to figure out if it's sun angle with certain ways that I shoot, and, how to recognize that on an ASA course and, adjust accordingly before you shoot, because like you don't have any time. You shoot one arrow to target.
One shot.
Yeah. It's like, so you don't have time you got to figure it out before you shoot,
Yeah.
But I know there's people, like Perkins said, he don't shoot on a lot of 3D targets. Someone else said that too, like they
Robert Householder. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously it works. It works for them. they shoot it well.
So, you were talking about seeing. We are coming up to the next one is London, famous for not being able to see.
Yeah, it's gotten better. Like they moved us off the power, they're kind of into the woods, just a little bit of a tease, I guess you could say. But it's better than it was. But man, there's been years I shot there. You have to have an umbrella behind you. All you see is people walking behind you and cars driving. Like you can't see anything because the reflection on your lens. So after I came away from that one last year, I'm like, I got to figure something out here, because that was terrible. On Sunday, there was targets. I literally could hardly see the target through my scope, let alone try to figure out where to aim on it.
I went out to the senior pro range last year before it started Saturday morning, and just walking up and down the range, and Jeff Hopkins said, PJ, come over here. Look down this lane there. I looked down the lane. I did not see a target.
Yeah.
I said, are you shooting here? He said, yeah, there's a target down there.
Yeah. It can be rough. I don't like it, because that just takes away, like a lot of it, just luck then.
Yeah.
I'd rather it be a little bit better lighting and be able to see a little bit better. But that second day there, because we shooting towards the sun in the morning, the sun was coming up and we was standing out in the open. I mean, you couldn't see anything.
Yeah. Now I remember you were one of the only ones I had seen before where you had fat arrows and your X10s in your quiver there, and you would switch depending on if the 12 ring was packed. Are you still doing that?
I still don't know what arrow to shoot for ASAs. I wish someone would just tell me. I really it's hard for me to get away from my Pro Tours, because when I shoot them here in the yard, there's no arrow that shoots better. Like, I can wad them up in a 1-inch group at 50 yards, like, no problem. I'm like, why would I shoot another? Why do I need a fat arrow?
Yeah.
More chance for glance outs, or not as good in the wind. I'm like, I don't know why I need a fat arrow. But there's been times where I've went there with a fatter arrow and I've scored higher, and I still don't understand it. The last one, in Louisiana, I shot my Pro Tours because I had just a ton of confidence in them.
Yeah.
And I ended up, I shot a good score, just missed a cut. And I really don't feel like I would have gained any points with a bigger arrow. I still don't think I would have. I actually think I would have lost points because, on the first day they had there's a couple real close targets.
Yeah.
And I was last up on it, and we had 5 in a group. So there was 4 arrows already in the 12. There's no way I would have put anything bigger than an X10 in there. And I had to get the right angle on the stake and, sneak one in there. And luckily I did. But I don't know. It's hard for me to get away from those Pro Tours. And, I talked to McCarthy and, Donnie and stuff like that. And they're like, I just feel like, you're going to you group good with those Pro Tours, but I just feel like you're going to score higher with a bigger arrow. And so it's either a Pro Tour or a 23, I think.
Is that right? But what I meant was there was a period there where you were shooting both. You had both in your quiver.
So I think that's like the best plan, is to have 2 setups going, to where if you have whatever, you got to sneak one in there, you need a smaller arrow, you have it. So that has been a good plan in the past, but like your main arrow that you're shooting, that you want to have that, shooting as good as possible too.
Right.
And so I've just kind of been back and forth on that a little bit here lately. I'm in the process of trying to figure that out right now. I want the Super Jive 25s to work because they're just the right weight, diameter, and everything. I just haven't been able to get them to shoot how I want them to shoot yet. So that would be the ultimate, if I had a perfect, arrow combo, that would be the Super Jive 25 and the Pro Tour. That's what I'm kind of trying to get to work.
So when Jesse Broadwater, when you talk about the perfect arrow, I keep thinking of a video you posted a year or 2 ago where you were shooting bear shafts at 90 yards. Yeah. I think it was an X10.
Yeah.
Well, it was a Pro Tour.
Yeah. Sometimes it works out that way where bear shaft just flies out of the bow pretty true.
Oh man. What's the key to getting that? Is it the weight? Is it your hand position? All of that obviously plays in.
Yeah. It's all of it. And like I think you can get pretty much any setup to do that. Like with a smaller arrow, I wouldn't say like a 27 size at 100 yards, but pretty much any smaller outdoor arrow, like you can tune the bow to get the bear shaft to hit at any distance really, but that doesn't mean it's going to be the best shooting setup.
Right.
It goes back to the whole group tuning thing. Paige has some social media, and I 100% agree with her, and that's how I've been. I pretty much got OCD, and I want everything to look right and be lined up right. But I've learned over the years that doesn't matter. What matters is how the bow shoots. So I'll just walk back and to 80 or 100 yards a lot of times with my field bow or whatever, and just stand there and group tune it and move the rest a little bit at a time, or maybe cam lean a little bit here or there. And you'll find a spot to where, the groups will just come in, everything will be forgiving, and then at that time I'll take a bear shaft at 20 or 30 yards, whatever, and I'll shoot it, and just to see where it hits and just use that as a reference in case anything would ever happen to move, or I question that my, bow come out of tune a little bit. I'll grab the bear shaft, go to 20 yards and shoot it. And, if it doesn't hit right where it did when I just finished group tuning it, then I know where and how much to move things to get it back in tune.
When Brady Ellison shot his 900 in Vegas, I forget if he was shooting 23s or 25s, but when those things came off the bow, the knock just kicked way to the left, and this thing flew like on an angle down there. Yeah. And I remember one of the guys in our shop said, "Man, Brady, those things are flying ugly." And he said, "Well, I don't care. They hit where I want them to hit."
Yeah, like look at my scorecard.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of what Paige was talking about, that, hey, if they group, who cares what they look like getting there?
Yeah, I mean, she just shot a record of 1535 in Reading. Like, that was the male record for years and years. Like, that's outstanding shooting. Yeah. And I think she went home and posted a video. She shot her bow through paper just to show people. And I think she was tearing like a whatever inch tear in a certain direction. She's like, it doesn't matter, you know, what your arrow is flying like, as long as it's hitting where you need it to hit, you know.
What is the premise behind that? Because you would think, well, it has to fly straight for it to be repeatable, but clearly that's not the case.
There's so many variables there. It's basically, it's like tuning a rifle. You know, it's like harmonics. You know, with bow, there's a lot more moving parts. You know, you got the string path and string oscillation, and depending on what rest you're shooting, how it's reacting off the rest, and then the spine of the arrow, and, you know, what makes it happy with how it's reacting off the rest. So there's like a whole lot of things that go into it. But, you know, when I tell people how I group tune a bow, and it's very unscientific, and they have a hard time with it, you know, because everyone thinks everything has to be lined up perfect, and center shot's got to be at 13/16 and this and that. And so I always give them, you know, I'm like, well, if you shoot a rifle, you can have a $10,000 rifle, and if you don't have the right load for it, it's not going to shoot good. So you got to develop a load. It might be 1/10 of a grain of powder charge up or down at a time until you find that right load to where, you know, the barrel harmonics are happy with, you know, how the bullet's exiting the barrel and all that. So that's all you're doing with the rifle is, you know, just tuning harmonics. Same with the bow. Only there's a few more moving parts there. So
I think I see a good video potential coming up here of Jesse Broadwater and Tim Gillingham side by side tuning arrows and bows.
Oh man. Yeah, he's
with his knock tuning, turning a 1/4 inch. Look at this, how I get that hole perfect.
I tell you what, though, he has been through the ringer and like done it all. And he has, you know, he's changed his philosophy throughout the years, but I mean, it makes sense, you know, and he's basically just gave himself more free time, basically. You know, he always used to shoot through paper, bare shaft, and do all. So he's just cut down on those processes and figured out what really matters in the end and what doesn't. And that's kind of the same thing I've done too. Like, I can shoot all my arrows through paper, bare shaft, and then I can index them, then I can fletch them, and then I can shoot them through the hooter shooter, or I can just fletch them and just shoot them through the hooter shooter and turn the nocks. You know what I mean? Like, there's just certain things you learn that just kind of saves you time throughout the years, I guess.
What's still motivating you in the game of archery? What's out there that's driving you? And, you know, is there something you still want to accomplish yet?
Yeah. I mean, it's just it's always the passion to do better. And obviously when you put in the time and the work, I mean, I'm so deep into this now. Like, I've been shooting competitively for 30 years now. 30 years. Been doing it since I was 8. And so the drive to win, like, you put in all this time and work and you go to a shoot and you win, and it's like very rewarding. Like, that's what it's all about. It's like shooting a good shot. I mean, you shoot that good shot, like, man, I want to do that again. But then you put all that time and work and effort in, you go to a shoot and you don't win. You're like, all right, well, what did I do wrong? What can I figure out to do better? And, you know, so then it's just, as soon as you get home on Sunday or Monday, like, you're back at it trying to figure out what you can do better and what you've done wrong. And you're constantly trying to improve on that. But there is, like, you know, this World Field Championship coming up. Since it's a game that I enjoy so much, and it's like I said, it's very rewarding when you nail everything and get it right. Like, it's just that rewarding feeling you get. Like, it's not about the money at that point. It's not about the money or anything. And I do this for a living to feed my family.
Right.
And, you know, that's going to come with it. You know, if you perform and if you stay focused on what you need to do, like the money part's going to be there, but just to win a world championship after you put in all that time and effort and gave it your all, your 100%. And, you're standing there on Sunday at the top of the podium with, the national anthem playing and the flag raising. And you're just, it's just that feeling that you get. And there's nothing like it. I mean,
yeah,
it's, so that's what keeps me coming back. I mean,
is there a tournament that you haven't won yet that you'd like to win, or one that you want to win again? Obviously the world championship, you want that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Vegas every year is my main focus indoors. So when I start shooting indoors, like I'm not thinking about the Iowa Pro-Am or, Lancaster. I love the Lancaster shoot just because of the way that it's done. But I think a lot of people's main focus is Vegas. When they start shooting indoors, like they want to peak at Vegas. They want to win Vegas.
Yeah.
So, and we all know kind of what it takes to win Vegas, and it's not really that hard technically to win it. We just got to be in the right, mental mind state. So that's kind of, I don't know. There's different things I kind of pick out every year. When I start indoors, I'm like, all right, what do I got to do to win Vegas this year? And then I kind of set goals. I'm like, well, this is where I need to be at this time. And if I'm not there, I need to figure it out. So it's just the whole goal setting thing and trying to achieve those goals. And I think you have to do that, or else you'll get burnt out on it. If you just look at the whole thing, as a whole, well, I do this for a living, and I'm going to shoot 18 events this year, and I need to win whatever, this many of them. It's just like, you can't do that. You got to really set specific goals for certain time periods and try to achieve them, and just kind of focus on the task that's more in front of you rather than looking so far ahead.
Gotcha. Was there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about?
Well, let's talk about you hitting the 12 ring this time with McCarthy or Perkins at AFA. What do we got to do to
you know what? I'm glad you brought that up, because at this point, it is 100% mental. Yeah. I've convinced myself that I go in my yard and I can hit what I want to hit. We just had, well, I'll say we had a little competition that we have to keep secret for now, but that I did poorly at. And then when I went home, I made the shots that I did not make when it counted.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, so I've been, shooting at home, shooting these targets, and I, do the shot of the week every time. And I'm like, man, I don't know how I just blew that. And then I go home and it's like, well, I can hit that.
Yeah.
So somehow I have to work on between the ears. That's where my biggest problem is.
Okay. All right. Do you get nervous when the camera's on you, or what?
I do. I get nervous. I can feel it. I can tell it's there. And even if the camera's not there and it's like, this is for score.
Yeah.
Even that makes me nervous. I don't think I do that enough.
Yeah. So that's what you need to do then. You need to go Facebook Live about 3 nights a week and just right there, your practice session, and just show everyone what you got.
Put it out here. Look, here I am shooting again.
Yeah.
That may drive me like to hide under the bed or something if I did that.
I think you hit some 12s with me last year.
I know.
I'm pretty sure you done pretty good, I thought.
That was when I was like, the confidence was going up. I'm like, hey, I know this. And then I missed a couple, and then that started getting in there, and then I missed a couple more. And the shot that I took with Perkins was probably the worst archery shot I've taken in 2 years, home or on camera, whatever. It was. Man. As I'm releasing, I'm like, this is a dumpster fire right here.
Well, it happens. You just got to learn from it. Just kind of think back on what your mindset was. And
yeah. So, hey, I've got high hopes every time I go in. I think, all right, this one's going to be the turnaround. All right, I got to remember. I got to remember shooting that 12 with Jesse Broadwater on that Panther.
That's right. I'll buy you a hot dog and a Diet Coke if you shoot 12 this time.
Perfect. All right, folks, that's another episode of the Competition Archery Media Podcast. Jesse Broadwater, congratulations on your big win, and we appreciate your time today.
All right, thanks for having me.
folks, the Competition Archery Media Podcast, you can find that where you find all your favorite podcasts. Thanks for joining us today.